All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, I've had a week off. We're back in the office, back into work.
And I'm so relieved to see you, actually, Jake, because you've been in Bulgaria skiing and snowboarding, and I warned you beforehand, don't come back with a broken leg.
Oh, mate,
Unfortunately, you haven't.
Yes.
But fortunately, now you can be my ski instructor.
Oh, I don't know about that, mate.
If I want to go.
I was like a newborn baby giraffe, mate, out there on the snowboarding. We took a few private lessons with a fella from Romania, and
good.
He was a hard but fair coach. Always told me when I was doing wrong and got up me.
Yeah.
But by about day 3, we'd started to pick it up a little bit and hit some of the slopes. Back in one piece, mate, all bones intact.
I'm so relieved,
Yes, a little bit sore though, but back and fighting fit. So,
and you missed a lot while you were away. You know, there's been a lot of argy-bargy in rugby league at the RFL level, we've got to say, lots of ins and outs and controversy and people being very angry with each other. So there's quite a bit to talk about.
Oh, absolutely, mate. It doesn't stop, that's for sure.
It doesn't.
All right, mate, without further ado, how about we get into the matches that took place over the weekend? A lot of really entertaining football being played.
Great,
we'll start with Thursday. Salford defeating Huddersfield 23 points to 10, and it was an inspiring performance from Salford, I believe.
Well, actually, Salford's first game, I think it was without Marc Sneyd, or the first game since Marc Sneyd left the club to go to Warrington. We'll probably talk about that later. And I didn't think they'd beat Huddersfield, if I'm really honest about it, but they did beat them and beat them convincingly. Jayden Nikorima had a terrific game. He really stepped up to the mark after, so to speak, after Marc had left the club. And I think it was a bit of a shock to everybody. And, you know, the Salford fans were absolutely ecstatic about that result. And poor old Huddersfield. If there's a gold medal for the unluckiest club in rugby league this year, it's got to go to Huddersfield and to the coach Luke Robinson, because they've just signed Niall Evalds from Hull KR to play him at full back, and in the very first game he suffers a major injury that's going to keep him out, a foot injury that's going to keep him out for ages. They just can't. They just seem to be dogged by bad luck at Huddersfield, a massive injury, injury list and so on. I feel so sorry for them, and at some point surely their luck has to turn, Jake.
And that's the thing. Like we said, for the first few weeks, they looked competitive. They just weren't able to seal the deal in some of those matches.
This was the first game in which they were not leading at half time. In every other game they've led at half time but fallen away after the break. This time they were 16-0, I think it was, down at half time. And you wonder what they can do about it. The only good thing is they did keep playing to the end. I mean, their tries, they got 10 points. Their tries were scored by Adam Swift on 68 minutes and Tui Lolohea on 77. So that does suggest that they were still, playing right to the very end. But as I say, at some time their luck has to change.
That's it. And once they get some of their troops back on the park,
well, let's hope it will. Yeah.
I'll move on to Friday's matchups, mate. We had Warrington defeating St Helens 14 points to 12, which was a pretty tightly contested match.
A great game, actually. An absolutely great game. And the difference was Marc Sneyd. Marc Sneyd created that first try for Warrington for George Williams, a beautiful side-footed kick through to the line, perfectly judged. The great thing about Sneedy is that the judgment of his kicks is so precise. When he kicks to the line, it very rarely goes too far or not far enough. It's judged just right to sort of give the chasing George Williams in this case every chance of getting to it to touch down, which obviously he did. And it was a spectacular try and a brilliant start to Sneyd's career. What's quite interesting about Sneyd is that he took control of that team having just arrived there. I mean, his partnership with Williams, George Williams is effectively a running standoff half. Brilliant player, George Williams. But Sneedy he's the brains of any team he plays in. And that's why, when he was linked to Hull FC earlier in the year, I said that wouldn't work because they already have Aidan Caesar who performs that role, and we've seen it in recent weeks. They wouldn't have meshed together in the same way that Sneyd has combined with George Williams at Warrington. And I think with those two playing, as long as they can both avoid injury, of course, I think they're a real threat to anybody else this year. It was a great game. Saints played well. I don't think you can say that Saints didn't play well, and they'll get even better. Saints are a threat to anybody this year. Their fans don't need to get too depressed about not having won that game. And they gave a debut to a young man on the wing, Dayon Sambu, who scored a spectacular diving try, which was great to see. And I love seeing that sort of slight element of showmanship there, But I love to see that, and it was terrific, and great to watch, and a fantastic game.
And just back to Sneyd, it's the beauty of having someone in your side with a great kicking game, because it's known to turn momentum. If you can get someone who can just if you're pinned in your 20 and you can get someone to get the ball down the opposite 20, like Sneedy does, it's a real game changer.
Absolutely,
and,
yes.
It could be one of the biggest transfers we'll see this season, I'd say.
Oh, the biggest, probably. The biggest.
Yeah.
I mean, the amazing thing is, we'll talk about the Test series later on, but the amazing thing is, when you look at Marc Sneyd, Jake, the biggest mystery in the world is, why has he not played loads of games for England or Great Britain, or England as it now is, of course? Why has he always been ignored effectively by the England coaches at various times in his career? Because he's such a brainy player, such an intelligent player, and it's immensely frustrating, I think. It reminds me of Leigh Briers. You're probably too young to remember Leigh Briers, but Leigh Briers was a similar genius as a player, but hardly ever got a look in as a test match player, and that's just crazy, absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah, and I think he's like a perfect example of a half that has gone through that maturing sort of stage, and now he's just picking apart oppositions with his game.
30, just turned 34, but he's still got it. He's still got it between the ears. That's the key thing.
No, absolutely, mate. Move on to the other matchup. We had Hull FC defeating Wakefield 16 points to 12.
Well, that was again another fantastic game, and another perfect example of Hull reviving under John Cartwright. John Cartwright's doing a really great job, and he's a really likeable guy as well. You can just tell when he's interviewed and when he speaks to the media. He's a real likeable guy, and I think that feeling has been, you can see it in the players themselves, I think. And, the Hull, this is quite amazing. Hull have already got 1 point more after 5 games than they had in the whole of last season. 7 points from 5 games. And, looking good. And, I said at the start of the season, I don't know if you remember this, that I thought Hull had some really good young players who are going to come on strong in the next few years. I sort of predicted it might take 2 years. But actually, what I probably underestimated was the impact that their more mature signings have had on those young players, and that the way that the mature guys, obviously Caesar is the obvious example, Jordan Rapana and so on, the way that those guys have, taken over and are guiding some of the younger guys at Hull FC. I think it's a delight to watch. Lewis Martyn looks to me like a young winger who could be in line for England selection this year if he keeps on improving the way he has. And it's a treat to watch them. And they're going to be playing Hull KR in the Challenge Cup as well, so what a game to look forward to that is. But Wakefield were unlucky because they had 3 tries disallowed, and all 3 tries were just so marginal. Difficult to, contradict the video referee, but Darryl Powell made a very good point after the game, particularly about one of the tries, the Tom Johnston one, where Tom Johnston touched down an Ollie Russell kick and was then adjudged to be offside. Darryl made the point that there weren't enough cameras in the ground to really allow a captain's challenge to be properly adjudicated. And I think that's probably true. These games, when the games are on Sky Sports Plus as opposed to one of the Sky Sports main channels, when they're on the red button, they don't seem to have as many cameras in the stadium, and that makes certain decisions by the video referee quite difficult because of the lack of camera angles that you might get. I don't suppose much can be done about that, though.
No, it's a very bare bones production when it is.
Inevitably. I'm still dubious about the captain's challenge, but there've been quite a lot of successful ones in recent weeks, so it looks as though it's here to stay. And I'm not violently anti the captain's challenge. I'm not just quite sure yet that I'm totally in favour of it.
Yeah, that's right. And you do see the impact that it has in the NRL when they've got many more cameras.
Oh yes, I think in the NRL it's fine. It's you can get a much better view of what's happening in the tackle in the NRL, and it works perfectly there.
And another player who I think is benefiting from those mature players that Hull FC have signed is Herman Sasa. Like, he's been devastating, I think, this season for them.
Brilliant player.
He scored that barnstorming try over the weekend.
Pity it's not English. Yeah.
Right, mate, we'll move into Saturday's matches. We had Catalans defeating Castleford 26 points to 4.
Well, this was played in monsoon-like conditions. I've rarely seen a rugby league match in which the rain was heavier. And Castleford, you might have thought that the Catalans, coming from the south of France, would find it difficult to play in those conditions, but they found it easier than Castleford did, and the main reason for that was the return of Sam Tompkins. Sam Tompkins scored an absolutely brilliant try where he got the ball 10 or 15 metres out and weaved his way past bemused defenders and to score an absolute wonderful try. And Castleford just couldn't quite compete with them, unfortunately, and the Tigers, we've now got at the bottom of the table Castleford, Salford and Huddersfield, and it does look as though those three teams are the three teams that are going to finish in the bottom three this year, according to early season form at least. But you never know, because things can change as the season goes on, and it's funny with Castleford, they gave that great performance at Hull KR in the first game of the season, where they took Hull KR, to Golden Point. It was only a Mikey Lewis field goal that won the game for Hull KR. But since then, they've just not been as effective. I thought at that point that Castleford looked to me like a team that was going to prove some of the doubters wrong, but then they need to somehow get back to the form they showed that night. Yeah,
absolutely. They're sort of yet to reach those heights. Now, the other matchup we had on Saturday, Leeds defeating Wigan 12 points to 10.
And it was Ryan Hall's 500th game, and what a brilliant occasion that was. The Leeds team gave him that they were in formation for him leaving the pitch, and Ryan spoke after the game to the Sky Sports people, and he's such a smart. I've written about Ryan Hall in this week's paper. He is such an impressive individual, and there was a bit of a debate this week on our readers' forum on TotalRL.com about people who are classy or not very classy in rugby league, and I put forward the idea that one of the classiest guys in rugby league has got to be Ryan Hall. He is such an incredible guy, and we had a press call with him last week on Zoom, and he was sort of revealing a little bit about himself, and I think he's probably the most academic guy who plays rugby league. If he'd not become a rugby league player, he would have gone to university to study pure mathematics, because he's a very, very good at mathematics. Apart from other things, he's also a very good pianist, and he's a brilliant Rubik's Cube guy. He can sort out a Rubik's Cube in no time at all, apparently.
Yeah.
So, he's no doubt got other talents that we're probably not aware of.
Yeah.
So he's a super guy, and it's great to see him playing 500 games. But he made the point. I mean, he's got a 1-year contract at Leeds with a 1-year option exercisable by both sides. He has already made it clear to Leeds that he wants to stay next season. And it's then up to Leeds to decide whether they want to keep him on. If I were them, I certainly would. But that's their decision, obviously. But he's very keen to play in Las Vegas.
Right.
It would be great to see him in Las Vegas, I think.
You know what that is? He can probably count cards, mate. He's probably going over there to make a bit of money. He's probably that smart. He's sitting there reading
I would certainly. Well, put it this way: if I don't know whether Ryan does play cards, but if he does, I'm pretty sure he'd be good at it.
Yeah. We've got to keep our mouth shut, mate. Otherwise, Vegas might be on to us, and we might be exposing him here. Yeah, that's probably why he's so good at scoring tries, mate. He's probably doing formulas in his head to find out, the right angle to take. And
well, I certainly think it's on a slightly more serious note. Ryan Hall is a guy who somebody at the RFL needs to be in touch with him to find out what his intentions are at the end of his playing career, because he is such an intelligent guy, and he's so dedicated to rugby league. I mean, he said after the game on Saturday that in his opinion, rugby league is easily the best game in the world, which I agree with him wholeheartedly about. And I think he ought to be perhaps a future chief executive of the RFL, or if that's the direction he wants to go in. I mean, who knows what he would want to do, but I think he's at that level. Put it that way.
Yeah, and that's it. And we've sort of been critical in the past of the RFL not keeping some of our former players involved with the governing of the game, especially.
Absolutely.
So for prime opportunity there to
for
keep
God's
someone
sake,
in with
don't let him go to the other code.
Oh, absolutely. All right, mate, we'll move into, just quickly, Wigan, nothing to worry about at this stage?
Oh, no. I mean, it was a tremendously competitive game. Leeds just hung on to win. It was one of those games. There are some games where it's the winning side gets such a lot out of it, but the losing side doesn't suffer that much. I mean, Wigan are Wigan, and they will always be extremely competitive. It was the second game they've lost this year after losing at Leigh, against Leigh rather. They lost to Leigh by 1 point. They lost to Leeds by 2 points. Yeah. Nobody can tell me that's a crisis.
Yeah. For and against is still looking good.
But for Leeds, Leeds had a crowd of very nearly 16,000 at that game, and that will have cemented their loyalty probably for much of the rest of the season, I would think. Yeah. It's a great result for them.
No, definitely. Moving on to Sunday's matchup, mate, we had Hull KR defeating Leigh 30-0. A big scoreline.
Shock result. Not in terms of the result. I thought Hull KR would win, but I didn't think that they'd win by 30 points. And, I'd be very, very interested to know what the Leigh coach, Adrian Lamb, thought about that one, because until that point, I mean, it's the first game that Leigh have lost. They're still second in the league. But, they might have expected a tight game, but not a 30-point defeat. So sometimes, clubs are brought down to earth with a bang, aren't they? Yeah. And Leigh certainly were in that game. And Hull KR, 5 games, 5 wins, 10 points, 3 points ahead of everybody else at the top of the league table. Absolutely amazing and fabulous, and congratulations to Willie Peters and all the Hull KR players. It's a remarkable record, and a remarkable turnaround from a few years ago. And I've got to say, Willie Peters and Matty Pete, the 2 coaches who are probably the best appointments made in rugby league for an awful long time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're deserving to be sitting at the top of the table. They've won some of those matches with injuries throughout, so they're proving they can do it week in and week out. Brilliant, which is really good. Yes. Just the other milestone, Leroy Kudjoe played his 400th game on the weekend as well.
And what a great guy. a one-club man, made his debut for Huddersfield in 2008. That's 17 years ago. It's unbelievable, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And, he's a quiet achiever, really, is Leroy. Absolutely exemplary character. And again, somebody who I hope remains in rugby league all his life. He's such a fantastic role model. And I would say, again, another player who exudes class in every sense of the word. I've got nothing but admiration for Leroy. And I think, the sad thing for him is that he's playing for a side that's not playing well and not getting results at the moment. And if he were playing for a team nearer the top of the table, I think his achievement would get far more mileage in the media than it has done. And in a way, it was a shame that his 400th came on the same weekend as Ryan Hall's 500th.
Yeah.
Because obviously Ryan, got most of the publicity for reaching that milestone.
Yeah. A little bit overshadowed, but what a career he's had, and still playing some great football. So,
well, a couple of years, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, he got a really bad knee injury that looked as though it was going to end his career. He was out for a long time with it, and some people told me that they thought he couldn't come back from it, but he has done, and what a great guy, and good luck to him. And my goodness, I've got so much admiration for him.
No, absolutely. Great resilience, that's for sure, mate. Now,
just look, while we're talking about the weekend's results, let's just look at one result in the Championship. Bradford Bulls 8, Barrow Raiders 18. Barrow Raiders, we made them our team of the week for that win because, to go to Bradford, who were the favourites for the Championship Grand Final this year, was a remarkable result, and it puts Barrow up into third place in the Championship. We don't often talk about the Championship as much as perhaps we might do, but it was a great win for them. And I've got to say also, Halifax 38, Featherstone Rovers 12.
Wow. Halifax
at the top of the table, 4 games, 4 wins, 8 points. At the start of the season, they appointed Kyle Eastman as their new coach. Now, Kyle, in his younger days, was a brilliant halfback at St Helens, but then went into rugby union for probably 10 years, I would think, or thereabouts, and has come back into rugby league and is a rookie coach this year. And when they appointed Kyle, I thought, my God, I'm not too sure about that because he's totally inexperienced in coaching terms, and yet he's had a sensational start to his coaching career, and everything you read about him, his comments are very smart and incisive, and I think I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated it, but I think he's going to be a real top coach as time goes on. I hope I'm not cursing him now and that they'll lose the next 4 games.
Yeah. Touch wood.
Touch wood. Yes, absolutely. But he's doing a terrific job at Halifax, and good luck to him and good luck to Halifax. I hope that the people of Halifax can get behind the club and give it the sort of support it deserves.
I think that's one of the things about these surprise appointments when we see them is we don't get to see the interview process and the pitch that the coaches give to the staff.
We don't.
When you do start reading some of the articles and read some of their comments and you go, hang on, that's quite intelligent what he's saying there, you start to realise, all right, now I see why the clubs appointed them, and obviously the results speak for themselves.
And the other thing, going down to League One, it's really interesting after 3 games, bearing in mind, we've only had 3 games, but the team at the top is Midlands Hurricanes. Based in Birmingham, played 3, won 2, drawn 1, 5 points ahead of all the rest, with North Wales Crusaders in 3rd place. So, Rugby League's expansion policy seems to be coming good in that regard. And Earl Crabtree is the managing director of the Midlands Hurricanes, the ex-Huddersfield Giants player, and it's great to see them doing so well. I'm absolutely delighted by it. And I hope we'll have Earl Crabtree perhaps on this podcast in the not-too-distant future, maybe to talk about, the progress of the Hurricanes and, his career.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be a great guest, that's for sure, mate. Now, there's been a lot of rumblings over the last 2 weeks since we last caught up, mate. Obviously, we had the Andy Maisie podcast go live last week. We hope all our listeners and viewers enjoyed that one.
It was a great one, yeah. And thanks to Andy for joining us last week. It was a great guest, I thought.
Oh, absolutely. It was nice watching that video back and seeing the pitch in the background. I thought it was a nice little background, mate.
Yeah.
But just some of the big talking points, mate. What's the latest on the RFL and their sort of handover, you might say, to the directors?
Well, it's a real strange one. 2 directors resigned from the RFL. They announced their resignation on the 14th of March, but they said they were going to actually leave the RFL on the 21st of March. In the week that between those 2 dates, they nominated a host of new directors for the RFL, apparently taking very little note of what the clubs had actually themselves wanted, because the clubs had got together and they were threatening a vote of no confidence in the chairman of the RFL, Simon Johnson, but it didn't actually get to the council meeting on the Wednesday 2 weeks ago. Instead, Simon resigned on the Tuesday, and then the two female directors both announced that they would resign too. And it was clear that what the clubs were voting for was to have the former RFL chief executive, Nigel Wood, brought in as the interim chairman, with Nigel Wood and Tony Sutton, who would then be the directors, presumably finding new non-executive directors between them. But that process has now been short-circuited by the arrival of several other new directors, who certainly the clubs weren't anticipating. And there's been quite a row. I believe there was a major row between Derek Beaumont and Tony Sutton about all of this earlier this week. Not too surprisingly, really, because it seems as though the RFL is more concerned. It doesn't seem to be doing what the clubs want it to do. Put it that way. It doesn't seem to think that it's actually answerable to the clubs. In any members' organisation, the directors have to be answerable to the members, and the RFL doesn't seem to be doing that. Now, although the clubs have passed a motion saying they want Nigel to be the interim chairman, nobody can be sure that these new directors will actually elect him as the interim chairman. So, and if he isn't, I suspect he'll walk away. So who knows?
I was going to say, because remember the council meeting was postponed.
Yes.
The scheduled council meeting was postponed. So do you think that was their move, so they were able to put this into place? Or do you think,
who knows?
Regardless of what happens?
It's a bit Machiavellian, isn't it? It's a bit Machiavellian. And but the directors who have resigned, it's a bit like selling your house and creating a bit of a stink on the way out, that will greet the new owners. And it's quite unsatisfactory, I think. And I just, and the ironic thing is that those directors put out a statement, citing governance issues as being very important in persuading them to resign. But actually, this is a governance issue that they seem to be directly contradicting the wishes of the clubs. And I just don't think I just think it lacks integrity, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to, swim against the current almost.
Well, I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Now,
so we've got to see how that will work out.
Yeah. Yep. Now, there's been a lot of whispers online over the last few days as well, mate, regarding the NRL's interest in the Super League. There's been whispers of an NRL Europe competition. Nothing. I don't know if there's anything reliable that's been put out yet. But
no,
what do you
it's
make
all
of it
speculation. I was told by quite a good source yesterday that the NRL are probably thinking about an 8-team competition in this country that would probably include Wigan, Warrington, St Helens, Leeds, the two Hull clubs, London, and Catalans Dragons. Well, that would be ridiculous in my view. If that, I can't believe. I struggle to believe that that's what they are thinking of. But if they are, I think it would be a disaster. And it comes back to the point where I just don't think that the NRL always fully appreciates the culture and history and so on of rugby league in this country, and I don't think it fully appreciates how big football is in this country and what we're competing against. I mean, obviously, if the NRL have, a few million quid then to invest in us, that'd be marvellous in that sense. I mean, money always speaks, of course, but I think our problems are such that we need a massive injection of capital, to be honest, from somewhere. And I'm not quite sure where that's coming from, if it's not coming from the NRL.
And I guess there's been a lot of speculation about whether the NRL would come in and then, as we've discussed on the podcast previously, inviting teams to come and apply to play in their new competition.
Oh, yes, there are all sorts of potential alternatives, but the trouble is, until we hear more from the NRL about what their intentions might be, if they do have any intentions at all, then we can't really comment with any authority, can we? And the NRL might think it's got enough, interesting issues of its own to sort out. I mean, one of its biggest priorities, of course, has to be deciding whether they can get a Perth side into their competition over there. So, who knows what's going to happen there. And, of course, they've got their next TV contract to negotiate, which I think begins in 2028, doesn't it, if I remember rightly?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. It's a lot to think about. I just, not so much thinking about what new competition could be established. I look at the fact, going forward, that we could potentially see little tournaments that involve NRL sides, Super League sides. That's what I would love to see, like a Super 8s or something like that.
It'd be a lot easier though if we weren't so far away from each other, wouldn't it? It's a bit of a nuisance that the two major competitions are, in different time zones and 12,000 miles away from each other.
Maybe we can all meet in Dubai and hold a tournament there, perhaps.
Or Qatar, yes, like the 2022 Football World Cup that was actually a great success after having so many dire predictions made about it.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll watch this space. I'm sure there'll be plenty of whispers. I know Brian Kearney made a comment on Sky over the weekend. I think he was saying
there's going to be massive changes. So he's very, very friendly with Matthew Johns, isn't he? Brian Kearney, from when he played over there. He's a very close friend of Matthew. So he obviously knows a bit from the inside, perhaps, but who knows? Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, that's right. Now, what else do we have here, mate? I just wanted to quickly touch on the Sneyd signing again. What impact do you think this will have on Leon Hayes? Because obviously he still hasn't played this season. It's sort of left, I guess.
Well, he's got a hamstring problem now, hasn't he? He started with an ankle problem, and that's now become a hamstring problem. So he can't play at the moment. I don't think. I mean, I think it'll be very positive for Leon Hayes. Don't forget that Marc Sneyd is 34. So although Marc Sneyd is a brilliant player, he obviously hasn't got an unlimited career left. I hope he plays for as long as he can. But at the age of 34, he's not going to have 10 years at Warrington, clearly. So Leon Hayes will be able to get opportunities, I'm fairly sure. But I think Sneyd is such a good player that I think Leon Hayes will learn an awful lot from him. Yeah,
it'd be great to have that guidance in the locker room, that's for sure, mate. Now, the other big news, the Ashes dates have been confirmed and the venues.
Yes.
So October 25 at Wembley, November 1st at Everton, and November 8th at Headingley. What do you make of these venues?
Well, I think we need to get cracking on selling Wembley straight away. Thank goodness this announcement's been made at last. I mean, obviously it was everybody knew what the venues were, but it was being delayed because the Australian Rugby League Commission and the Rugby League Players Association in Australia were negotiating the players' terms and conditions and so on, which obviously they've now done. Thank goodness. So, but it will take some selling. We've got what is it, about just 7 months before the first test, so on October the 25th. So, I hope that the RFL will go into overdrive, or Rugby League Commercial will go into overdrive to sell tickets for that game. And I think with a bit of luck, they'll sell plenty of tickets for Everton, because everybody's quite curious to see what the new stadium at Everton is like. I certainly am, and I'll certainly be going there. But the size of the problem is shown by a readers' poll that we had recently, that we reported in last week's League Express. The question was, with the Ashes Test Series matches likely to be played at Wembley, Everton and Headingley, which matches would you plan to attend? The winning vote was none at all, 26.22%. The next one was Everton, only Everton, 21.42%, which sort of shows the attraction of Everton. Then only Headingley, 14.31%. The two matches at Everton and Headingley, 12.82%. All three test matches, only 8.85%. Wembley and Everton, 8.11. Only Wembley, 4.30. And Wembley and Headingley, 3.97. So, those figures are not that impressive for what is Rugby League's core audience, which is the people who read our newspaper. So those 26.22% who said they won't be going to any of the three test matches, those people, we need to change their minds, don't we?
Absolutely.
To put it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and like that first match at Wembley is crucial, because let's just say England win the first match. I guess those opinions will change. Everyone will be racing to get to the second one in the third match.
Well, interestingly enough, there's been some criticism of the RFL for holding the third game at Headingley, with some people saying, Headingley's not big enough, it only holds about 21,000 or thereabouts. Whereas Newcastle, if we'd gone there, that would be 52,000 or so. But interestingly enough, if the third test, if the two teams going to the third test, having shared the series 1-1 up to that point, I think that there'll be a massive run on tickets for Headingley. And it will be one of the few occasions where people will be prepared to pay well above the face price of a ticket to actually get in to see that game. And I think that's going to be really, in Rugby League, we don't have enough events where there's such a big demand for tickets that the demand easily outstrips the supply. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity. All we have to do is to make sure England win at least one of the two games leading up to it, and let's hope we can. But it would be a wonderful opportunity to see demand exceeding supply, which is so rare in our sport. And we've got to get to a situation where far more games are in that situation where, as I say, demand vastly exceeds supply at the price that tickets are sold at.
I want to see some off-field drama. I want to see Sean Wayne and Mal Meninga putting a bit of fuel on the fire, and with a few comments in the media. Like, I'd love to see the players getting involved about how much they're looking forward to smashing each other at the end of the year.
I hope that Sean doesn't just try and play Australia the Australian way. We've always traditionally beaten Australia. We've never traditionally beaten Australia for many years, but when we used to beat them by playing adventurous, quite risky rugby very often. And if we try and play a defensive, highly structured game that's modelled on what the Australians play, we very rarely. You don't normally beat Australia by playing Australia's game. Put it that way. So I hope that Sean will be a bit more imaginative.
Yeah, that's it. Chance the arm. Look for the offloads,
Well, exactly.
Yeah, I can't wait, mate. I'm bummed that I'm not going to be here to watch it.
Well, you can always come back.
Yeah, that's it. See if they can give me a lift, maybe charter me over with the team.
Absolutely, yeah.
In other news, mate, Tim Laffire, he's announced he's going to depart Salford. Another player leaving, unfortunately.
Bad news. Yeah.
And it looks like he's going to return home to Australia, which is a bit of a disappointment for Super League.
It is. He's been a great player for Salford, but again, it's just the rumblings from all the problems that Salford have had. The crucial thing for Salford is, I think this Thursday, tomorrow, is payday for their players, and it's going to be interesting to see whether there are funds in place to pay them this week. If not, then who knows what's going to happen. But this deal to take them over, who knows? I mean, I'm sick to death of thinking about it, to be honest, Jake, and who knows what's really going on. But, we can just hope, can't we?
The disappointing thing of this season is how great the on-field action has been, but I guess how disappointing the off-field action has been.
Precisely, yes.
It's overshadowing the great product that we have at the moment.
Of course, yeah.
Now, mate, we're 5 weeks into the season. Do you have any key takeaways? Have you learnt anything in these first 5 rounds that you didn't expect at the start of the year?
Yes, Hull reviving is the first thing. I didn't think Hull would play as well as they have done, and they've just had the odd touch of luck as well, which always helps, doesn't it? Like those 3 disallowed tries by Wakefield on Friday night. Leigh doing so well. I thought Leigh, when they lost so many key players at the end of last season, I thought they might struggle to replace them. But, until running into Hull KR on Friday night, they were really going extremely, extremely well.
Yeah.
And, I thought... I wasn't sure how Catalans were going to play this year, and I thought the first 3 or 4 games, first 3 games, indicated that they might struggle a bit. But fortunately, in the last 2 games, they've shown a lot of improvement, and they've come back strongly. So there's a lot of I think there are 9 teams in Super League that are very competitive with each other. And I think we can anticipate a lot of really great games as the season unfolds. There are 3 teams at the moment that are struggling. And when those 3 teams come up against teams that are much stronger than they are, then I think, we might see some one-sided matches. Huddersfield v Hull KR this weekend, Wigan v Salford. It doesn't look great, does it? I'm afraid. And... that's a real great shame. Yeah.
Who knows? It could always be an upset, but unlikely at this stage, I would say.
I'd have thought so, yes.
Now, there's been some news down the NRL, mate. A lot around DCE, Daly Cherry-Evans. Looks like he's set to leave Manly at the end of the season.
Well, put it this way. If I were an English rugby league club, I'd be very interested in trying to sign him for a year. Absolutely great player. Again, something I said about Ryan Hall, a very classy guy. A very classy guy. And I think he'd be a tremendous asset to any club that signed him. I doubt whether he wants to leave Australia, having said that, and I doubt whether he wants to leave Sydney, I would have thought. So maybe the Roosters look as though they might move in for the final year of his career. But he's been an absolute great role model as Daly Cherry-Evans. He speaks extremely well about the game. He's a very clearly a very intelligent guy, and but it'll be a shame when his career finally does finish.
I think it was refreshing seeing him talk about his situation because, from my understanding, his manager reached out to other clubs in the off season, and not many clubs showed any interest in him. So Manly Sea Eagles came back and said, "Well, unless other clubs are showing interest in you, we're not going to table you an offer." So he's pretty much played on throughout this season. Went on 100% football, the TV show on Channel 9 the other day, and that morning, I think Danny Widler, the 9 reporter, broke the news that he was looking at either leaving Manly at the end of the year with the thought of either retiring or playing on elsewhere. And then that night on NRL 360, they reported that news, to which the Seagulls got on the phone and said, no, we're going to table him a 2-year, $1.5 million deal.
Right.
And then later that evening, Cherry-Evans was scheduled to go on 100% football, and then they reported that news, and Cherry-Evans basically said, even with that proposal, I'm still planning on leaving the club. So, I don't know. It's giving me flashbacks to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, Adam Reynolds debacle. And we see how that's worked out for South Sydney. So,
absolutely, yes.
I mean, the Roosters did it with Cooper Cronk. They brought him in towards the end of his career. They got a premiership out of him.
They did. A great player, yes.
Yeah, so...
Played with a broken shoulder, I think, didn't he, in the grand final?
One of the toughest, grittiest performances I've seen.
Amazing, yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if the Roosters pick him up, but hey, he'd be great in the Super League as well if we could poach him.
He certainly would, yeah.
The other signing news Brandon Smith looks like he's heading to the South Sydney Rabbitohs. There's been a lot of whispers about this.
Well, he's never really fitted in at the Roosters, has he? For some strange reason. There are doubts about his dedication to training that I've read about in some places. I don't know whether that's true. I think he's lost a lot of weight. Whether losing weight and actually limits his, effectiveness, I'm not quite so sure. Really, I probably don't know enough about him. But he always strikes me as a really gritty player.
And that's it. And the debate around him has always been whether he's a starting nine, and obviously he left the Storm to get the opportunity at the Roosters, but then they went and signed Reece Robinson from the Cowboys, so it sort of left him out in the lurch a little bit. But it looks like Wayne Bennett signed him to be an impact player off the bench. That similar role he was playing at Melbourne.
Which he certainly can be, But there's an interesting one, isn't there? An interesting analogy at Hull KR. I mean, they signed Michael McIlorum, and they've got Jez Litton, who's a potential England number 9 as well. And they tend to play McIlorum as a starting hooker, with Jez Litton coming on later in the game. And that seems to be working extremely well for them. And, McIlorum's there for the tough stuff right at the start, and then Litton comes on when the opposition's getting a bit more tired, and he's very, very sharp around the play of the ball and so on, and can make breaks and so on. And that just seems to be a formula that's working, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's a great asset having two in your side that can play that 9 role.
No,
for sure.
No doubt about it, yeah.
And the other surprising news for this season, mate, the West Tigers find themselves in 5th place.
Yes.
They're playing good football to start
Well, I've always
season.
had a soft spot for the West Tigers, and in particular for Benji Marshall. I'm a great admirer of his, and I've always always liked the Tigers ever since they won the grand final in 2005. You remember that? Benji Marshall, Pat Richards and so on. Absolutely brilliant winning try.
And a few colourful post-match interviews as well. I think there was a few swear words being said by a few players that have always done the rounds.
Yeah. So, it looks to me as though West Tigers, are going to be competitive this year. On the other hand, at the bottom, we've got Parramatta, North Queensland and the Dolphins, and St George haven't won a game either. They've got 2 points simply because they've had a bye, and they get 2 points for a bye. So there are quite a few clubs that are struggling, although only after 3 matches. But Parramatta gave a much improved performance against Canterbury, didn't they, at the weekend? Losing at home, but not losing by much, and they got a great crowd of 24,000 for that game at Combank Stadium. So the fans haven't deserted them yet, have they? Mind you, there were loads of Canterbury fans in there. When Canterbury go well, they really draw some big crowds, don't they?
Yeah. And like we saw a couple of weeks ago at that match at Belmore,
yes.
It's sad that they won't be playing there for a while. But when they play there, it's almost like a
well,
protest,
it'd be nice for them to get somewhere close to filling Acor Stadium, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely, mate. Before we get into this weekend's matchups, Martyn, is there any other news you'd like to touch on, mate?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a lot there.
Yeah. So it happens when we sort of go without 2 weeks without seeing each other.
Absolutely,
so much to talk about. All right, mate. This Thursday night, Castleford taking on Hull FC. Who do you have in that one?
Well, if Castleford are going to, reverse their run of bad results, then this is a game that they ought to be winning. But I think Hull have got too much momentum behind them now, and they'll take a massive crowd to Castleford on Thursday night, and I think they'll win by probably about 10 points.
Friday night we have Warrington taking on Leeds.
That is the 5,000th Super League game. Yeah, 5,000 games of Super League since that first game in 1996 between Paris Saint-Germain and Sheffield Eagles. It's quite appropriate, isn't it? We were talking about Ryan Hall earlier, having just completed 500 games, and it's appropriate in a way for him to be playing in the 5,000th game. I think this is a really compelling game. I can't wait for it, to be honest, Jake. I think this could be a golden point game, actually, and if it is, Warrington will win it with Marc Sneyd. But I think Warrington, hopefully with Sneyd, are on the up, but Leeds are also on the up, given what we saw against Wigan on Saturday. So it's a hell of a hard game to call. as I say, it could be Golden Point with a Marc Sneyd field goal winning it, after 2 or 3 minutes into Golden Point.
I wonder who the bookies have in that one.
Be interesting to know, wouldn't it?
Very tight odds, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Then we also have Leigh taking on Wakefield in the second clash on Friday night.
Well, again, another great game, and these two teams will play the following week in the Challenge Cup at Wakefield. So it's a bit of a warm-up for that game. Leigh will want to bounce back after that heavy defeat at Hull KR, and I think they might just be a bit too strong for Wakefield on this occasion, but Wakefield will give them a very good game. And Wakefield are, in one sense, a typical promoted side in the sense that they're playing well, they're taking teams very close, but they've only had 2 wins out of 5. They're not quite able every week to get over the line to win a game. But they've got to keep trying, and hopefully, the wins will start to flow. But I can't quite see that happening on Friday.
Yeah, all right. And then Saturday we have Catalans taking on St Helens.
Well, that's an interesting one, isn't it, as well? I mean, there are so many interesting games coming up. Catalans have got Sam Tompkins back, and I think he is the crucial piece in the jigsaw. So I would tip Catalans to win a very close game. It's a game that could go to Golden Point potentially, but I can't see either team winning this game easily, and I think Catalans could just sneak it.
Very hard tipping week, that's for sure, mate. Sunday we have 2 matchups. We have Huddersfield taking on Hull KR.
Well, the 2 Sunday games... The 2 Sunday games look a lot easier to predict, don't they?
Yeah.
You can't see Hull KR not winning at Huddersfield, especially with Huddersfield's injury woes at the moment. And Hull KR, by and large, seem to escape without too many injury problems. So, there can only be one result there. I would think they'd win by about 20 points.
Yeah, their strength and conditioning coach must be paid well out at Hull KR. Well, he's doing a magnificent job.
Yeah.
And then we have Wigan taking on Salford.
Well, wouldn't it be a shock if we said Salford were going to win that game? I mean, obviously, I see Wigan probably scoring 50 points here.
Yeah.
I can't, unfortunately, see any other result, and that will be. I mean, obviously, if the Salford players are not paid this week, I'd dread to think what might happen. It could even be another St Helens result. Who knows?
Cricket score, perhaps. Yeah. Well, fingers crossed they get paid. All right, mate. We'll wrap it up here and do it again next week.
Absolutely, and it's great to see you back, Jake. And don't go on too many more skiing trips. Fortunately, the as we get into spring, the snow is disappearing from most places, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
So
mate.
we'll hopefully see you every week from now on.
Oh, that's it, mate. And glad, always happy when you don't have to use travel insurance. It's nice to buy it, but great not to have to use it.
It certainly is. Yeah.
All right, mate. We'll see you next week, eh?
Great stuff. Thanks a lot, Jake.
No worries. Cheers.
Bye.